Okay, one of the things I really like about this conference is it's trying to blend both industry and academia and user experience all together. And so this is our chance to hear. We've had a great representation of ONWARD and ANEUVO, but we also want to hear from our other industry sponsors and participants. So we'll get started. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Doug Lautner. Very humbled to be here with all this talent and all this expertise. And all the presentations before this, really learned a lot. And I'm hoping with this presentation, you guys learn a little bit. So what I'm representing Abbott, but this is pretty much an industry discussion. And not just, I would say, neuromodulation industry, I would say medical industry, and I actually come from tech. And I would say this is very, you could almost have this type of presentation at Google or Tesla. It's pretty ubiquitous. And what's interesting about that statement is the convergence of tech and the medical industry is happening quite fast. Abbott itself just was announced. It's now when you talk about innovation, it's really in the same light of Google and some Apple and some of the other big tech companies. It was ranked number 27 this year from Fortune magazine as most innovative companies. And it's made really large progresses over the last few years. So why did I come from tech to neuromodulation? And it's really this slide, the start of this slide. I knew about neuromodulation. One of my mentors came from DARPA to Google, and together we ran a research team. And she said, there's this technology coming out called neuromodulation, and it's really going to help people, and it's going to be really the basis of social good. It's something you should really consider. So I did. I listened to her. I left tech, and when I was researching neuromodulation, it was this particular point that there was an implantable that was addressable through a Bluetooth protocol. And my background is from Google is with the Android ecosystem, the whole connectivity piece. So I thought this was amazing. Like, I couldn't believe this type of innovation was in industry and in particular in the medical industry. So when I came, it was sort of like this. And you could think of the patient clearly dictated here. There's the implantable, and then on the far right-hand side is an iPad. And you can think of the iPad as a physician, okay? So I come, I'm looking for this job, I see this, and super excited, and then they say, but the job is in Texas. Texas? So pickup trucks and tumbleweeds kind of went through my head. And but anyways, Texas turned out to be pretty good. And this story is actually pretty interesting. So when we first came, this is 2018, we knew that, and it kind of comes up in these conversations too quite a bit, that the patient is really first. And having something that's connected directly to the implantable, that's usable and easy to use, is important. And we saw some other industry experts and academics show their versions of this. And for us, it was, let's put the software as a medical device, the Class 3 software, on a person's phone. So that was quite radical at the time, and we worked with the FDA. And I think another bias I had besides Texas was the input I got was the FDA was, it's regulatory, it's slow, it's bureaucratic, and it was nothing like that. So when we started working with the FDA, I found their guidances to be quite good, and I found the individuals to be quite good experts. Like, it wasn't what I thought in my mind. And so I really enjoyed working with the FDA on this particular piece. And in this piece in particular, to download a Class 3 medical device on your personal phone was a cybersecurity concern. So understandably. And we started with cybersecurity first with this project, and we got this approved right around 2020. The next logical step, and by the way, when I show this isn't just Abbott. I think most of the other companies are thinking this way, and for sure in tech, it's almost exactly like this. The next piece was this, it's logical. If I put a cloud system between the physician, if you think of it on the right-hand side, and the patient, and I use the phone as a proxy, I now can have accessibility to care. In other words, the physician can be anywhere, and the patient can be anywhere. And this, the timing of this, so this innovation was about 2019, 2020, and then guess what happened? The COVID pandemic. So when that happened, the use of being able to send digital therapy at a distance where someone could be in their home, literally in their home, and it happens quite often nowadays, it's pretty common, was very useful. So chronically ill patients would not have to travel in to see the physician. The physician could be isolated. They wouldn't be in those environments. And we could provide the therapeutic efficacy as we worked with the stimulation parameters. So this was quite good. And this particular piece at Abbott we call Neurosphere, and it won Time Magazine's innovation, top 100 innovations in 2021. It was basically at Wall Street Journal. It was like all over the place, and it was a very important building block too. Again, working with the FDA, their guidance and their expertise in this was really paramount. It wasn't like, let's get through the FDA. It was, we wanted the input, so we had a lot of interaction with them. And just at Abbott itself, we have a lot of excellent regulatory experts within Abbott. So we do this, and now it really opens up possibilities. So when I came from tech to here, my background's actually in AI, and now AI is much more popular because of the ChatGPT. But AI isn't like a thing. Like, it's not a tool in itself. It needs something to run upon. And now we have a system that's really a full stack system all the way from the physician to the patient, from cloud application into firmware that AI can run upon. Okay, so this was a really important piece. Something about the cloud, if you guys don't know too much about it, it's not one thing. So in our case, and again, many platforms are like this, it's a cloud of clouds. So in our system, we don't just access and scale through Azure, which is Microsoft. We actually, with Google Cloud, which is a little bit back into my background, and AWS, and these clouds talk with one another. And what it allows us to do is really to provide services and build upon tech giants for kind of the benefit of the patient-physician relationship. But to do that, to really take advantage of that, we have to change. In our case, we're changing the downloadable software to be service-based, okay? And this is critical because if you really want these closed-loop systems and you want these things to work, the patient really has to have a software that's easy to use, that you don't have to download a bunch of different applications and worry about all those types of kind of arduous tasks. If you had a single application that you can push services to, that would be ideal. And these services wouldn't really be practical to be a class 3 medical device every single time. So again, with the FDA, with their foresight in this case, there's a guidance around multifunction. So a single application that can have a class 3 medical device residing with a non-regulated medical device service, as well as just a service that's not even medical necessarily. It's very well written. It's extremely helpful, and it's something that we're aspiring to take advantage of, work with the FDA, and now have something for the patients in their hands on their personal phone that allows services to grow and change with that individual. And not all individuals are going to have the same service or set of services. Just like if you looked at your phone now and if everyone showed their home screen, every single person has different applications and different ways of setting it up, and it's similar to the patient. So we expect this to be a really good enabler and really a precursor to any type of kind of progressive AI closed loop systems, and this is in progress. Yep. So real quick, with these services, you can grab data. We can get, obviously, the implantable data. We saw some really good presentations on these closed loop systems. You can get wearable data. This allows us, and again, talked about quite a bit today, and I'm sure it's going to be talked about later, to work with stimulation parameters. At Abbott, we're lucky. We have a pretty diverse set of sensors. In our case, we have not only diabetes care that provides us different type of fluid analytics, but it's extended into a product called Lingo, which would be a whole nother set of parameters to put into the system. From there, and we saw it again in some of these presentations, you can start to get in personalized waveforms. And this is really interesting when it comes to spinal cord injury, which is something Abbott is interested in, and this system would really be beneficial. And then really one of the really key interesting things is video analytics. So kinematic AI with audio, et cetera. This is becoming very promising. And in this scenario, because it's someone's personal phone and in a virtual clinic session, it has a telemedicine element, the data is collected passively. Like I mentioned, all of this has been built with AI first, security first, and then an AI backbone. So when these AI systems become more mature and ready for deployment, the system would be capable. And then finally, I wouldn't be a good scientist if I didn't make this more confusing. So here's my kind of closed loop story. We have the internal closed loop, just like we've talked about. That has certain benefits and it's used, but it's used in parallel with this edge closed loop. And then finally with a full closed loop. And you really need all three of these things to be effective, to have a maximum effectiveness. So that's the presentation for today. A little bit different spin, more of a digital spin, kind of leading into AI. Really, another statement about the FDA being great partners. I'm quite pleased with that. And that's it.
Douglas, but that was a great lead-in to my conversation as well here today. Kind of want to take and build off of what Tim and John started talking about today. Ricky called back to it earlier, and I'll call back to it again on Tim's kind of holistic wheel of a therapy offering and thinking about workflow viability and economic viability of a new therapy. And some of the insights, I'll just provide a couple insights that we've done at Inspire as we've kind of emerged as a new player in the neuromodulation space. So I'm not going to repeat John's slide, but just reiterating, we're an obstructive sleep apnea company, and so we stimulate the hypoglossal nerve, which then protrudes the genioglossus forward, which reopens your airway in the event of obstructive sleep apnea. Want to just kind of baseline on what our system is. The very right side are the implantable components, so the generator itself, the stim cuff, and then the sensing lead. I'm not going to speak too much about that today. I'm going to mainly focus on the data we get from the top half of this. And so if you've seen our commercials, you'll see the patient remote's always front and center. And all the data we're going to be talking about today is predicated on log events stored from this remote. So if a patient turns it on when they go to bed, turns off therapy when they wake up, they can pause if they get up in the middle of the night for some reason, and then they can increment and decrement their amplitude to whatever comfort settings. Back to what John alluded to, if they have a couple cocktails, they might titrate themselves up. So not initially within our product offering, but soon thereafter, we started to build this more complete system, which included putting Bluetooth capability in our remote so we had more reliable data pipes through a patient's mobile application into our SleepSync system, which is our cloud. And then the bottom half of this is the clinician programming system, which also has some logs that also go into the SleepSync, but I'll speak more about the patient usage patterns and what we've learned from that. So thematically, not telling anyone anything they don't know right here, but first you got to collect the data, and then you got to have some people understand the context of that data, why it matters, and think about the data that you want to collect ahead of time. Obviously, clinical endpoints matter a lot, but then what are other things you can be measuring within your patient base, either directly or indirectly, that might inform new product offerings, technology, different things like that. And so we've collected a team of data scientists, a lot of whom are in this room right now, as well as the engineers that go off and implement these ideas or change our clinical guidance. So one of the nuances of hypoglossal nerve stimulation is you get the implant procedure, you wait for 30 days, you get activated, and then we find your therapeutic level, but we actually send you home at a lower amplitude. And because there's a certain acclimation period to this, so it takes a while for people to comfortably sleep with the stimulation on, with this new tongue motion that they're dealing with. So we kind of start them a little bit below therapeutic level and then coach them to walk up to a therapeutic level. Well, at the outset of this, our guidance was turn it up every night until you're good. And there is a variety of challenges that related to that. And so you can see here in the pink is a single patient. The x-axis is days since activation. They're stepping up a tenth of a volt, so an entire volt in just under 3 weeks. And compared to now our entire 43,000 patient data set that we're basing this off of, this is our median patient step-up pattern at this point in time. So we start to hear from clinicians, from patients, that people stepping up too fast is causing their adherence to fall down. So the right axis on this, right y-axis is device usage, and so we care a lot about device usage. This is a sleep technology. If you're not using it at night, that's a conversation starter at a minimum. And so if usage goes down, that's at least an indication that we need to understand why is this patient not using it, what's going on. And you can see median usage is much higher, greater than six hours a night for the broad population upon that step-up acclimation period. But for individuals that over-titrate themselves or are too aggressive in stepping up right away, maybe they find it uncomfortable too fast, or they lose faith in the therapy, and now they're starting to have concerns with their clinicians or to our patient services line. So these anecdotes started to pile up. Various clinicians would talk to us and they would say, I've started to dial back the guidance. I'm going 3 days. Let's do it once every 3 days. And eventually we actually had this data system in place so we could look at large populations of data and say it actually should be more like 7 days. Those are the people that are having better acclimation to the therapy. And so therefore, without really any changes to our products, we were just able to change the way we coached people on coming up and acclimating to the therapy. And so you can see across our population, the days between steps up have dramatically shifted between 2020, which is approximately when we changed this guidance, and then last year's data set, which is a contributing factor, but not the sole reason why patients are starting to use Inspire for longer. If we look at their overall usage in their first year since implant, that's been something that's been trending up for us because it's a multifaceted approach, but we're looking at all the different ways back to, like I said, if you're not using it, that's an indication of a problem. Either it's not efficacious or it's uncomfortable or something like that. So usage is very important to us as a company, and driving, changing guidelines, changing surgical approaches, those are all methods that we've used to increase our usage over time, which is something we care a lot about, and so do our clinicians and patients. Another example of having these data systems and population-level statistics is you can start to look at various patterns. I alluded to the pause button earlier. And so there's your basic, immediate responders that they love it, they use it every night, they've got subjective benefit, objective benefit, and they're using it, which are the three things that we care about, our clinicians care about. And then we start to look at, are there different patterns in this person's sleep that is noteworthy to us? Do they have sleep hygiene issues? Are they going to bed too late? Are they going to bed inconsistently? Maybe they're a shift worker, or they've got just bad patterns, and they're not going to be able to treat their obstructive sleep apnea or just feel better if we don't take that into consideration. And then another thing that we've also noticed in these patterns are high pausers. Why is someone pausing their therapy too much? There's so much in the first 30 days since their activation. So we started to look at, in this category of people that we're identifying as high pausers, we looked at pre-implant ISI results. ISI is the Insomnia Severity Index. And so on a much smaller sample size, obviously, but where we had this data, we saw that this category of people had higher ISI scores, which is an indicator of insomnia, than the rest of the population. So their pausing behavior starts to corroborate with that. And then post-implant, that's still a higher ISI than the other people. And so, or our broader population, I should say. And so this is, at a minimum, a conversation starter for the clinician to say, we've been so worried about this person's untreated sleep apnea all of these years. Have we considered that they've also got undiagnosed insomnia? And so what's next for this patient? They're feeling we've solved their sleep apnea issue or mitigated it, and now to be a more complete sleep health offering to this patient, either the clinician needs to engage with their insomnia, or we as a company start to engage with their insomnia as well. So those are just two examples of using these digital technologies to either change the way we coordinate care with our clinicians, which at this point in our company, we're trying to make sure that we can scale appropriately. And some of our early adopters are concerned. I've got 300, 400, 500 patients in my practice. I can't see all of these people all the time. So how do we provide tools to them to identify these people are doing great? You don't need to follow up with them. These people have some nuance, or they're struggling on something. This is what we might see. Have a conversation with them about that. So there's scaling and enabling clinicians, and then there's just having a more dynamic product and better outcomes for the patients themselves, obviously. Customized education, coaching, various things without having to do new medical device development that we could start to provide as complementary services or features, as well as inform where we go next within our technologies as well. So all that said that's how we've been using digital technologies and thinking through kind of the workflow viability and the economic viability within this emerging technology to make sure that not only while we're growing as a company and our patient base is growing, but they're also using it more, having better outcomes, we're finding the right people, and then we're treating their issues as they emerge. And that's it.
Okay, I think I'm going to be an outlier on this panel because I'm not going to talk about research or process. Tay, he told me, hey, I want to know that you're not just doing research, that you're really going to build a business that's going to bring therapies to people with spinal cord injury. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a different presentation today. There's going to be some business elements in here. I hope that's okay. Maybe a little bit of a break in your afternoon. I thought Tim and Ricky came up here and they really threw around their Minnesota bona fides. I have some too. My parents were both born in St. Paul. They went to U of M and St. Thomas. And I lived here for 7 years. So 2 tours of duty with Medtronic. I spent the first 14 years of my career, in fact, with Medtronic, where I had vice president roles in sales, marketing, product strategy and business development in the US and Europe. I then ran a NASDAQ-listed company, a public company in the US that was number 2 in the world in automated external defibrillators, the sort that you see in airports and in office buildings. And then I founded 2 startups that generated 3 Time Magazine Best Inventions of the Year. And then I moved to Europe 4 years ago to take over at ONWARD. And because I have the Minnesota background, I don't like talking about myself, but I'm telling you that because I'm like a professional CEO. This company has a professional CEO. I'm not a researcher trying to do this on the side. I'm a real CEO, and I've been able to recruit even a better team than me. You know, you met or you saw Erica Ellison up here earlier. You know, she is emblematic of the stature of the people whom we've been able to recruit because they're driven by the mission to really impact this community. Okay? So let's get rolling a little bit here. We are a listed company, so I have to put this slide up. And you saw this slide earlier, but I added a bit more detail this time around. What do I want to point out? We're a publicly traded company, so we're on Europe's largest exchange. It's called Euronext, and we're covered by 5 equity research analysts, okay, including Stifel, which is US-based. So again, very real company here. We have 2 technology platforms. As you can see, they both stimulate the spinal cord to restore movement and function. We're very innovative, so we have 10 FDA Breakthrough Device Designation Awards, probably driving FDA crazy with all of these, but it shows that they genuinely want to help companies bring forward technologies that will make a difference to this community. That's why I put that in here. And we have also 240 issued patents worldwide. Many companies at our stage are delighted to have 1 or 2. Like we have nearly 250. So we have freedom to operate. We can protect our technology, our therapies, from others who want to enter and threaten our position. We already have 1 pivotal study complete. You saw Dr. Jim Guest earlier today detail the findings from the Uplift study. We look forward to the publication where more fulsome results will be available. We also have positive interim results reported for our implantable therapy. I'm holding our implantable device here. And we look forward to starting that pivotal study later this year. And we're launching into what we think is a significant total available market. Moreover, we expect to launch our first product late this year. So finally going to start, really bringing these solutions to clinics and homes where they can make a difference for people. This is the sort of the market sizing slide I use when I speak with investors. You know it's a devastating injury. You know the prevalence figures. The thing I want to focus on here are the figures it right. This is an expensive injury, right? The average cost to support someone with tetraplegia exceeds $5 million. So if you have that sort of cost to the system, and you have an opportunity to offset those costs by improving independence and reducing adverse events and outcomes, you can build a business around that. You can offset that pain, that expense. These are the 2 technology platforms. You saw these earlier, ARC-EX, ARC-IM. And these gives us the flexibility to target multiple symptoms, multiple recovery targets. So we're going to start with the first 2 and then expand from there. And that's indeed our focus as a company. This year, just get this ARC-EX system on the market. So you all have access to this therapy as soon as possible. And you heard one person's experience, John Trinesky. We're hopeful everyone has that sort of impact. And then we hope to start the global pivotal study for the implantable device also at the very end of this year, and then if all goes well, have that on the market by late 2026. Once these 2 platforms are approved and we've demonstrated safety and efficacy, it will be easier thereafter to expand the label to other autonomic functions and other movement recovery targets. This year is hugely important because we do expect to commercially launch the ARC-EX device. We submitted the de novo application 2 weeks ago. This is a big deal, and we're looking forward to hopefully FDA clearance and first commercial sale by the end of the year. I mentioned before as well, we hope to start our pivotal study for the implantable device with many of you as our research centers and investigational partners as well. That involves IDE submission, IDE approval, and first participant enrollment. And then we want to make continued progress with our ARC-BCI system, and you heard something about that from Andrea earlier as well. So very busy trying to move things forward for the benefit of people with SCI. First indication for our ARC-EX device is improving arm and hand function because that's a top priority among people with tetraplegia. No-brainer. You saw the system diagram earlier. That's our stimulator, connects to leads that are placed on the skin, controlled by a tablet programmer. The first indication we're pursuing with this device, our implantable, is actually improved blood pressure regulation. So we founded the company to help people walk again. You saw Andrea talk about some of that work. But we feel that the blood pressure regulation indication can impact more people more quickly. And so that's why we prioritize that ahead of walking and ahead of some of the other indications for which we're currently doing clinical feasibility work. We're doing clinical feasibility work on mobility, on upper extremity function, on blood pressure, with and without a BCI, all with that ARC-IM implantable platform. Very busy. This is that platform. So we have our own purpose-built neurostimulator, our own purpose-built family of leads. The device is recharged wirelessly through the skin, controlled by the clinician with a tablet, controlled by the person with SCI with a smartwatch, which they really love. Adds a lot of utility. You saw this from Andrea. We also are very active in BCI. This is the first gentleman to receive a BCI-enabled therapy. The way this works is the BCI sits on top of the motor cortex. It decodes brain signals, the intention to move, sends those to our device, which uses AI to translate them into specific instructions for our device to then stimulate the spinal cord to affect thought-driven movement. That's how it works. We think we're very well positioned in this space. You heard from Ricky. A number of different companies are using BCIs to use thought to control computer peripherals, mice, keyboards, voice generators. We're the only ones who are using these brain signals, these brain recordings, to restore movement of the body. So we're really special in this regard. And our device is BCI ready. So it's designed to accept wireless instructions from a separate device. That means we're agnostic. We're thrilled to work with any of these companies when they're ready. And so in the meantime, we're continuing to advance our understanding and learn from clinical feasibility work. In terms of funding, we've raised over $150 million. So starting with Europe's leading life science VCs, we added the Christopher Reeve Foundation in 2019. I don't know where Marco is. So this is their first ever investment in a company. You know, they wanted to transition from strictly funding research to funding translation. And that's why they invested in ONWARD. They're going to do much more of this going forward. You'll hear some announcements from them in the next month or so. In 2021, we added the Dutch government and then two family offices, actually, the Onassis family and one of the Porsche families. And then we did our IPO in 2021. A lot of very well-established investors around the world. And then just last month, we added another $22 million. So we've shown that even in SCI, where no one has proven they can build a business, we can raise funds because we've been able to show that we have developed compelling technology, we have intellectual property, we have good clinical results, we have a very strong team, and there's a profoundly unmet need. Okay, key takeaways. We absolutely believe there's a business here, and we're committed to building it. We have, I think, very promising clinical data with one pivotal study done and another one about to start. We have, I think, demonstrated significant innovation with the FDA Breakthrough Device Designation Awards and all of these patents, nearly 250. Very well positioned strategically with respect to BCI, experienced international management team with a proven track record, and we've shown we can raise the capital that we need to fuel the company going forward. All right, Tay, did I hit the mandate? Okay, how are we doing on time? Okay, I have a lot of time. Does anyone have a question for me? No, really? You don't want to talk about reimbursement or timelines or anything? What I hear all the time is, well, God, I mean, I've been doing this for 4 years. When is Medtronic going to get into this? When is Abbott going to get into this? You know, and you guys just keep waiting. You don't need them. We're here. Okay? I mean, they're going to come once we've shown that it's a business. So they're going to come when you don't need them anymore. So support us. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
So,
yes.
as far as reimbursement, what has been done? Do you have a plan, and where does that go?
We absolutely have a plan. It's a complicated topic, and it's different for the transcutaneous device than it is for the implantable device. For the transcutaneous device, obviously clinics, hospitals, they can buy it out of their capital equipment budgets. They have ample funding for this. The VA as well has ample funding for this. So the question of reimbursement really is salient when one thinks about home use. And for that, we need a Hincapie code, so a DME code, all right? We don't need that for the first, let's say, 30% of the population in the US that's eligible, because those within the VA system, those covered by workers' comp, and then a certain percentage of people can self-pay. They could buy it right away. We want to establish a real-world pricing history, then go to CMS for a code. So we'll get the Hincapie code from CMS. And at that point, most of the big commercial payers like Blue Cross and United will follow. So we think first of all, we think right away 30% of covered lives will have access to the transcutaneous therapy. Within 3 or 4 years, 75% will have it. With the implantable device, we still have time there. We don't want to be anchored to pain devices because it's very competitive and those reimbursement levels are going down. We want to have fair pricing so we can continue to invest in R&D, obviously. So we think that there's a path for us to start with a Category 3 code, maybe benefit from new technology add-on payments and pass-through payments, and then get a Category 1 code to follow at the appropriate time. So we've done a lot of planning, thinking it through. We want to maximize access, but also make sure we get a fair return for what are breakthrough therapies. Okay? Thanks.
Inviting me to present on behalf of Medtronic. My name is Juan Hincapie. I work in the neuromodulation research and technology. And I only have a few minutes, so I won't have enough time to do justice to what I'm going to present. So I encourage you guys to come talk with me at the end or ask questions. And there's a myriad of my colleagues that know a lot more than I do about what I'm going to present. So go talk to them as well and ask them questions. I'm going to focus today on one of the biggest innovations that we think is happening right now with neuromodulation, and is the implementation, commercialization, and research that goes behind therapies that are now based on sensing a physiological signal from the body. So how do we close the loop there? So I'm going to present stuff that is still not approved and is still in the research phase. So I have my disclaimer there, as well as working for Medtronic. So let's start with a little bit of history, on closed-loop therapies. So we've had closed-loop therapies for a long time in our space, and Medtronic has been a pioneer for many years in that space. The easiest example is the cardiac pacemaker, right? When it was invented, it was about delivering a fixed rate of stimulating to pace the heart, and that helped patients. But very soon enough, they realized that was not ideal for many reasons. So Medtronic came up with the possibility of sensing the heart and then making a decision of when to pace the heart. So that's a good first example of closed-loop therapy using a physiological signal directly recorded from the heart. Now we have diabetes closed-loop systems as well that measure your glucose as you go about your day with activities of daily living and make a decision about how you should change those with your glucose monitoring system as well. But today we're talking about neuromodulation, the Neuromodulation Symposium. So I'm going to talk about those therapies and signals that are coming now and showing the potential to really close the loop in our field. So I'll focus on DBS and SCS, and then finish with a couple of examples on pelvic health, and talk a little bit about spinal cord injury, because that's our area of focus for this conference. So how does that journey look like? And Tim had a nice circular degree this morning. Some of the other presenters have done a really nice job about this. But it's really about starting with the research. What are the signals? What are the physiological signals of interest? And can we identify them? Can we record them reliably so that we can start to build up our knowledge of what to do with them? So step number 2, once we identify and capture that signal, is to use it to build the algorithm of what to do. How am I going to respond? How is my therapy going to be adjusted based on the signal that I'm recording? So that's step number 2. Step number 3, now it's about building the system that can chronically do that. And it has to do it long term, it has to do it reliably, it has to work all the time, 24/7, not just in the lab and not just within the clinical study framework that you develop the work initially to get your approval and finally your commercialization driver. And finally, you actually put it into a closed loop system that responds to the signal, and now you have to go back into the clinic and test and demonstrate. So you gather your requirements, your inputs, and you develop that closed loop therapy example. So let's go through our examples in each of the therapies that Medtronic has worked. And I think this is very interesting that our first dib into closed loop neuromodulation started with DBS, which you'll think is a more complex therapy. For years or years, I was sitting in talks hearing about DBS and the mechanism of action, where to stimulate, how we stimulate, is still under debate. We don't know much about it. But what happened is the researchers came and knocked the door with Medtronic and say, hey, and I'm giving one example. There's many examples of this and many of this research happening in places around the world. These Parkinson's patients are in a medication, and as they go through their day and their medication goes up and down, we notice that there's changes in their symptoms. So we would like to figure out how to detect that automatically and respond to that stimulation. Well, we didn't have a system at that time. This was 13, 14 years ago. So Medtronic built a system, Tim talked about it this morning, that is capable of recording local field potentials in the brain. So not just putting an amplifier into the implanted device, but actually calculated a spectrum of that signal and identifying those bandwidths of frequency, just to be able to detect this marker that for a certain frequency band, depending on the action of your medication, that frequency fired up and had a bigger power, or fired down and had a lower power. Made a lot of sense, but building the blocks of finding this signal, then creating the technology, it's taken a long time. Where are we today with DBS? Well, we have 2 FDA-approved systems called Percept. We have a rechargeable system and a primary cell system that are able to record this signal in real time. The clinician can sit down with the patient, can look at whatever parameters they're using for stimulation, and they can see the power of this LFP signal. So we are now at the doors of closing the loop. We're running a clinical study called the ADAPT clinical study, where we're now saying, okay, we recognize the pattern in the signal, now we're going to intervene and turn the stimulation up and down. So that example is from the ADAPT clinical study on the right, where we're starting to do closed loop technology. So the devices capable of doing the sensing are already available out there for use. The closed loop system is not yet approved for use. We're running the clinical study, but we hope to have that in the market very soon. So that's the DBS example. Spinal cord stimulation, interesting enough, you put these leads in a very dynamic environment. What does that mean? That you place the leads in the epidural space, but the spinal cord is floating in the CSF. So as you do activities of daily living, as you stretch, as you cough, as you lie down, the spinal cord moves closer and farther away from your electrodes that have been implanted. What did we all learn in grad school for neural engineering? The distance between your electrode and your target drops very quickly, that electric field, right? 1 / distance squared. So what happens is, if you're delivering open loop therapy, if you're delivering 1 milliamp to the spinal cord is not seeing 1 milliamp. It's seeing 0.9, 1.2, 0.7, 1.1. So your dose is not constant throughout the day. So in my first slide, I had accelerometer and ECAPs as the signal of interest in SCS. What Medtronic developed about 15 years ago and put an accelerometer in the device. The accelerometer is able to detect posture changes. So these are big changes in body posture, for example, when the patient goes to bed and lies down. And we can use that signal to change the stimulation parameters. So we've had that version of a closed-loop system for a long time. But the one we're really excited now, and we've been working in the research on this for the last few years, is the use of evoked compound action potential, ECAPs. So the ECAP is a signal recorded from the spinal cord, a physiological signal recorded from the spinal cord, but it doesn't measure pain, right? Don't get too excited. That'll be the holy grail. But it's a sensor signal. It tells you how far your stimulation electric field is able to penetrate the spinal cord. So what can I do with that? Well, I can monitor it 24/7 and make decisions about how to adjust my stimulation. So on the right, you have that example. On the bottom right, on the left, you have open loop stimulation. Your stimulation never changes, and your ECAP amplitude is going up and down as your patient is doing activities of daily living. On the right, you have the closed loop system in action. As the ECAP amplitude goes up, crosses a certain threshold, the stimulation amplitude gets adjusted, and you're 24/7 monitoring your ECAP amplitude and adjusting the dose. So the hypothesis, and we're running the studies to show this long-term, the hypothesis is longer-term dose control in these patients will lead to better pain relief. Now, we don't know that for sure. So that's a hypothesis for now. But again, the building blocks of the technology started with DBS. Now we have it in SCS, and we have the capability to reliably, without noise, control, record, and then use the signal to control the stimulation. So this is the SCS example. So what's next? So in pelvic health, we stimulate the sacral nerves for the treatment of incontinence, fecal incontinence, and urinary retention. So this is a 4-electrode system that the surgeon places into the roots of S3 sacral roots, sacral nerves. And we now demonstrated feasibility. We were a little earlier in the process for pelvic health, but we now demonstrated feasibility that we can stimulate and then use the remaining 2 electrodes to record a signal. Why is this signal important? Because that's what our clinicians use to titrate this therapy. And they're looking for a muscular response, and they're looking for a sensation from the patient. The bellows clench and the toe flex there are the 2 classic ones. But now we've demonstrated with feasibility studies that we can record this signal and reliably use it for assessing where our perception is and how to set those stimulation thresholds. So this is another example of bringing closed-loop technology into a neuromodulation in one of our therapies. So my last slide here, just because I have a few minutes, is to talk about epidural stimulation for spinal cord stimulation. And there was a workshop yesterday. My colleague Nate Torgerson gave a nice and longer presentation. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. We've had a nice collaboration with the University of Louisville. Tim mentioned this morning, we also helped the core team labs on the early days of their technology assessment, and we saw Andrea's amazing presentation of the work that they're doing in Switzerland. So really here is just a few considerations to think, what's the value for this indication for closed loop? So think about it. How can I close the loop, and what kind of signals can be used? We looked at wearables. We saw accelerometers and other things in earlier presentations. SCI gets personal for me. I did my PhD in spinal cord injury with C5, C6 patients, restoring upper extremity function. And it's been a long way. So I'm really excited to see the newer companies and the newer labs come up with exciting feasibility work. And again, the studies have been run now for efficacy. I think the road towards commercialization and adoption, it's a long road. We recognize that, but technical feasibility, yes, it's there. Like I said, I see everyone started to collect the clinical evidence that is needed. And we had a great discussion on regulatory issues. We had a great question on reimbursement that it's still, kind of needs to be figured out. But I want to recognize the work of everyone in this field, and Medtronic is happy to be part of it. I have to finish by saying, without federal support, this wouldn't be where it is. So we really need to continue to have the federal agencies support this research. So thank you very much.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. While we're waiting for the laptop to be set up, first of all, thanks for being with me today. And it's really an honor to speak after several esteemed companies. I believe that each of those esteemed companies has paved their own uniqueness path to through the industry. And I believe that each, those diverse approach is really enlightening to see this diverse approach can lead to success. So my name is Yikai Lo. I represent ANEUVO. ANEUVO is a company that we are working on neuromodulation device. Specifically, we are working on bioelectronic medicine. So ANEUVO is a company we are focusing on developing bioelectronic medicine, and we are currently in the progress of integrating bioelectronic medicine with digital health. And I believe that each one of you might should be very, very familiar to bioelectronic medicine. It has been shown the potential or be proven that using bioelectronic medicine, or say neuromodulation, there's a high possibility that we can treat many diseases, conditions, or injuries that cannot be cured through conventional medical approach or using conventional pharmaceutical drugs, including spinal cord injury. And ANEUVO, ANEUVO, we are developing a digital therapeutic platform. During the past decades, we've been working on developing our own microelectronics, developing our own flexible sensors, electrodes, and also work on algorithm development or AI machine learning. And we even built our ANEUVO cloud, a HIPAA compliant cloud. And we are also interested in developing, we are also developing digestive bioelectronics. And then in the company, we are able to synergize different components and turn them into product to modulate the neural system or even target at individual organs or tissues. And then our first target is spinal cord injury. So as you might know that individuals with spinal injury, they might lose their motor function, sensory function below the lesion, below the level of the lesion, and the patient might also have bladder bowel dysfunction or even autonomic dysfunctions. And as you all know, there's currently no cure to spinal injury, and the current gold standard is still physical therapy. And one of the solutions that has been tried or proven or shown the potential during the past decades is transcutaneous stimulation. And the hypothesis behind this is that I cannot see from here, the working hypothesis for transcutaneous stimulation is that for patients with a healthy individual, their level of excitability can exceed the threshold easily, but for the patient with spinal injury, it cannot. So that with neuromodulation, it's a hypothesis to boost the neural activities so that we can exceed the level of excitability again, or vice versa. So when we first look at this transcutaneous stimulation, probably 5 or 10 years ago, we know that most of the research or other colleagues, how they do this is that they place two electrodes on the neck to do either one electrode C3, C4, the other one is C6, C7 for upper extremity. And some of them put 2 electrodes on the lumbar circle, T11, T12, or L1 to facilitate the motor recovery or locomotion, or even use these 2 electrode locations for bladder and bowel functions. And as an engineer and also researcher, when we look at these problems or the transcutaneous stimulations, the first question we have in mind is placing 2 big electrodes externally, where does the current flow into the body? And this kind of question is very intriguing. Then we start to look into how we can improve this. As you might know, and also the presentation presented previously, using epidural or implantable stimulator is much easier, I would say, it's much easier to place electrode close to the target. So the focality or specificity is, of course, much higher than non-invasive stimulation. Then, we are thinking about how we can use a non-invasive approach that can improve the focality. So go back to our ANEUVO digital therapeutic platform. We built a very advanced wireless portable stimulator using the microelectronics that we developed. Then we look into the realistic human model and build a very flexible electrode array, try to explore how we can make a more selective and targeted stimulation not invasively. So by looking at two examples here, the first one is we are trying to use an array placed on, around the cervical spinal cord and try to stimulate C5 as a target. And then another example I'm trying to show here is if we choose another electrode, put that in different locations, and we're trying to stimulate T2 as a target. So the color code shows the strength of the E field. So this is what we are trying to do using a non-invasive approach by trying to deliver more targeted and selective stimulation transcutaneously. So here's our product. ExoStim is our flagship product that we are developing. We received FDA breakthrough designation as well, but we only get one. But we are trying to use this single breakthrough designation to cover more than one conditions in spinal cord injuries. And ExoStim is a wireless portable spinal cord stimulation device. It has 3 components. One is a very flexible electrode array. There was an ACI workshop yesterday, so we kind of circle around our electrodes, hope that you guys are trying to see it. And then the second component is a wireless multi-channel stimulator, and the third one is an app. So the app is designed very easy to use, and the device is connected to the cloud. And the system is designed in a way that it can deliver very flexible and versatile stimulation, not just for clinical use. It can be also used by researchers like you guys to explore or understand the underlying biological mechanism. And it's highly transferable to other indications and patient population. And we are conducting a pivotal trial across US at 14 sites. So we are running the randomized control trial and trying to recruit 140 people. And in our study, we have an independent SHAM group and independent STEAM group. So I'll talk more about the studies tomorrow in the lunch symposium. And we got 2 news interviewing our patients, one in Fox News, one in Maryland. And in the same time, we are working on another study. We are working on another study trying to use the same technology to explore whether we are able to treat pediatric cerebral palsy. There's another news aired on Fox 7, so they came to interview our PI and our patients. And we are still shooting for our de novo submission next year after we finish our pivotal trial. And I do want to spend a few seconds to talk about our journey. So I'm a researcher, and I came from academic lab. So I spent 10 to 15 years at the lab to work on basic research, animal studies, and try to learn how to file patents, wrote everything by myself, along with the help of attorney. And then starting from 2019, the company was founded, and then with external resources, we're able to expand the team, to grow. And during the past 3 or 4 years, we not only work on product development, we work on a few proof of concept studies and also work on regulated clinical trial regulated by the FDA. And one thing that I do want to mention that I'm a first-time CEO, so it's very interesting to start a company from scratch. You see that something you create in the lab, right? And you turn nothing to something. And then I would say that many of you are researchers. So what you learn through your PhD or the academic work you do, you are getting your muscle. You know how to tackle things, you know how to learn things, you know how to be tenacious to get things done effectively. And now we are in the middle of a clinical trial. I'm hoping that next year or later this year, we're able to share more data with you guys. And I would like to, Leslie, I would like to thank our strategic partners. We've been working with a bunch of key opinion leaders in the US to help us conducting our clinical study, and they all provide a lot of useful feedback to help us improve our product, improve our user interface, or also provide a lot of insight to help us to do our clinical trial design. And also thanks to like Matthew, a lot of patient advocacy group in the U.S. They help us to connect to patients to collect their feedback to help improve our product for the patient to use in the future. Thank you all.